Oh god, there are so many Cowboy Bebop videos out there. For good reason. It's a great series that really lends itself as a starting point for some great interpretive work, and if you want to really get started and don't know where to really jump in when it comes to interpreting and analyzing media, Cowboy Bebop is a wonderful place to start. But that wealth of content on it is also the reason why that when my dear patron fickletraitor requested a video on the main man Spiegel himself, I shuddered. What could I possibly add to the mountain of character dissections, thematic discussions, and formal analyses that already exist, made by more knowledgeable people than me? I am not an expert on this show, I've not watched it a billion times, so what really could I give to you that is different or more innovative than what has already been said? The answer is nothing. Basically, the only idea I could come up with is to present a personal reading, a subjective look at a specific note I always associate with Spike, and with Cowboy Bebop in general. I am tired. I am always tired. It doesn't matter how much I sleep, or how much sports I do, and how healthy I eat, I'm just always tired. It isn't something I always had, it's just kind of become the norm at some point after I became an adult. I suspect that tiredness has something to do with what I can only describe as the weight of living. Without getting too sappy, I am a grown man who has lived, and I assume many of you are as well. So maybe this perpetual tiredness is the exhaustion of the ever-growing baggage, both severe and mundane, exasperated by the never-ending grind of daily life. Thoughts like these then usually lead me to one question. Is this normal? Does every adult feel like this? Did my parents feel like this too? Is this maturity? This is a feeling I fundamentally and forever associate with Spike. You just look at this man and you know he feels it too, the nagging weight of just existing, of moving forward. Spike's story is, as described by the aforementioned mountain of video essays, about carrying your baggage, your trauma through your life and just coping with it all. He is, much like we all, tasked with a mature kind of suffering, a quiet, stinging pain that never quite goes away. And he is, almost more crucially, somewhat dysfunctional in that coping and suffering. I say somewhat because he isn't exactly a broken man, at least not on the surface. At first glance, he's a charming young man who can keep a superficial conversation going, with an acceptable level of social skills and enough wherewithal to not starve or whatever. And yet, he is not complete, the baggage of his past not allowing him to truly be happy or move on. Perhaps dysfunctional isn't right either. Perhaps, rather than dysfunctional, the better term would be stagnant. It's not that he is actively falling apart, it's rather that the act of keeping himself together stops him from moving forward. Spike never really changes or improves neither himself nor his life throughout the run of Cowboy Bebop, and he doesn't really let the events of the episodic adventures the crew runs into affect his worldview. He is a bystander, his trauma never letting him open himself to being changed and educated by the experiences he makes during the show. That's not to say he doesn't want to. His tendency to continuously be sucked and involved in other people's drama shows at least a subconscious interest in experiencing a world beyond the cage of his past, even if he tries his hardest to pretend otherwise. No, he clearly on some level wants to move on, but is incapable of doing so. It is this conflict, this paradox that defines much of Spike's presence in the series, and also is what defines him most within my mind. Because this, to me, is an absolute tragedy. The desire to move on from a lifetime of regrets, but the inability to do so due to an internalized complacency and reliance on those regrets as a fundamental part of who you are, is basically a vertical slice of the most negative outlook on life, and more specifically to me, adulthood. Because by the time you get to late 20-something, you have probably already experienced things that have shaped you, things that have remained with you, things that whisper to you in your darker hours. And it is those things that, in the process of wanting to define you, also end up trapping you, making you indifferent or invisible to the future. By the time you are 30, 40, 50, or 60, those trappings may have gotten so severe that the indifference towards the future has sort of just become bitterness, with no clear culprit. Or maybe not. I'm not there yet, and I do not want to claim knowledge on experiences I simply have not had. I am in my mid-20s. But looking at a character like Spike sends a shiver down my spine every time. Because in all honesty, I am scared that this is, in a way, the default way of living. That this mature way of just suffering through our lives is so widespread and socially encouraged that it's hard to even imagine the world functioning without it. That, on some level, we all become so entrapped with the process of coping with what we have lived that we end up missing out on what we could have lived beyond that. Thank you all for watching. This got kind of heavy, but you know, it's kind of difficult to talk about Cowboy Bebop without doing that. So I hope that it wasn't too out of the ordinary for you. Thank you all for watching, and a special thank you to all my patrons, including Daniel Garcia, Fiction Ape, Paracha, Cini, Victor Perez, Trader, and Mr. Meander. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, be safe, bye bye.